Hey there, this is Two Cherries Instruments. I'm James Cherry. This is Stones, a short series of tips and tricks that I think work great in this art we call luthiery. Today I've got something really cool for you. I think you're going to like it, and it's certainly something that I use all the time. So let's get this thing set up. So today we're talking about CA glue, and specifically Starbond CA glue. This stuff to me has been great. I use it all the time. I use it for everything. It's part of my standard set of supplies. It's just something that you have to have in your shop if you're going to be doing this kind of work. Now, if you've been watching the channel, you can see that I use this all the time. I rely on it, and I used to just go with whatever I could find. I'd go to the hardware store, I'd pick up whatever was cheapest. And I knew that I liked the medium viscosity for most of my work. I knew I liked the thin viscosity for some of the work that I do, but I wasn't really picky about what I was using. Starbond has been kind enough to offer us a special discount code for this video. Using the code YouTubeTCI at checkout, you can get a 15% discount. The link is in the description below. When I started really relying on it a lot in the work that I'm doing here, when I started using it in the shop very regularly, I thought, hey, it'd be really great if, a CA company reached out to me and would be willing to have me review their product. I thought that would be something that would work really well with this channel. And as luck would have it, Starbond did that. They've been keeping me very well stocked for the last little while. I made a dedicated product review video for them, and it was a lot of fun to make, and it was an interesting thing to do. They wanted to try it again, so I'm doing another one. I'm gonna talk to you a little bit about how I use CA glue and how I think that Starbond makes the best product out there when it comes to CA glue. Starbond wanted me to answer some typical questions that I get and some of the questions that they get about using this product. Now, I'm going to be specific and talk about how this works for guitar making, violin making, luthiery work. And I also rely on CA glue a lot for CNC Workholding. And that's really my core use of this material. It's a supply that I use to just hold parts to the CNC machine. So let's talk about how I do that. So in principle, what I do is very simple. All I do is I use standard masking tape. I apply the masking tape to the part, and then I burnish it in. I use this little stick, and I rub the adhesive from the masking tape into the part. So it's on there really, really good. And this is something that double-sided tape can't do. We'll talk about that a bit more in just a second. So once I have the tape on the one side, I put the part on the bed of the CNC machine and I mark where the tape is. Then I lay down another piece of masking tape on the opposite section. Again, I burnish that in. So now I have two pieces of tape opposed back to back that are both really well adhered to the part and the bed of the CNC machine. Then all I have to do is run a bead down one of the sides. Sometimes, not always, but I'll apply activator to the other side. Line up the part on the CNC machine, press it down, and it's there. So I still get questions about how I use this to hold things on the CNC machine. And the typical response, that they're surprised that it holds as well as it does. Now, this may surprise you and it may not, and many people will not use this work holding method. But for a lot of parts, this is really the way to go. It's a simple, easy way that's incredibly adaptable when you're talking about work holding. So I can put stock on the machine in just a huge dynamic array of ways. I'm not really limited by clamping. I don't have to do special programs to avoid clamps and avoid work holding. I don't have to have specific dimensions in a vacuum work holding system. Now, all those work holding systems are great and they all have their place. I still use clamps. I don't use vacuum work holding, but it's something that we're probably going to look at in the future. But for right now, what I do, doing custom work, doing custom parts that are all different shapes, all different sizes, this is really the only consistent way to get the results I'm going for. So the other big surprise that people have is that this work holding method is good enough to hold parts on the CNC machine. Now, I typically take a pretty moderate pass depth on most of my work, and that's really just because I'm trying to avoid mistakes and problems. I could go a lot faster, I could be a lot more aggressive, but I've got the time. It's not really a necessity for me to be that aggressive. I literally use a chisel to pry the parts off the bed after I'm done. And when it comes to thin parts like fretboards, they flex significantly just coming off the bed. So I personally think it holds very well. I've had clamps come loose, I've had double-sided tape come loose, but by far the most reliable work holding that I've had in my experience with the CNC is using Starbond CA and masking tape. So why not just use double-sided tape, right? I started out using double-sided tape, and I've used a lot of the different brands of double-sided tape. My favorite probably would be the blue carpet tape, the double-sided carpet tape. The stuff works really good. There's one key item that you can't get with double-sided tape, and it's pretty simple when you think about it. So I described the process that I use to burnish in the tape on both sides. You can only burnish in one side of double-sided tape. The other side is going to be just a press fit, right? There's no way to get that anymore. You can press on it really hard and try to get it in there as well as you can. But if you've used this stuff enough, you'll realize that under the right circumstances, with the right vibration, it's gonna come loose. I used to use it all the time. When I figured out this system, I hardly ever get a piece come loose anymore. And when I do, I know it's my fault. I didn't set it up properly. So, maybe double-sided tape works great for you. I think it works great for a lot of people. But for me, this is the way to go. Another question is how much accelerator to use. Now, the accelerator, it's a valuable piece of your toolkit. It's a valuable thing to have. You don't always need it, but it's a great thing to have when you want it. Really, in my experience, you need very little activator. A lot of times in my work holding, I will spray a very light spray of activator. So when you're squeezing CA glue out into a very thin line, it dries very quickly. So it's not always required. It's just kind of something that gives me the confidence to know that CA glue is pretty well set. One of the other things I've noticed is that over time, that CA glue does get harder and more brittle, and that makes taking the parts off the bed of the CNC more difficult. And it also makes removing the masking tape that's been burnished into the part and the bed of the CNC more difficult. I'll set up a work holding setup, I'll cut the part, and then I'll get that part off of there as soon as possible. So I try to get it done in an hour, and then everything comes off. But I have, from time to time, left stuff on the bed of the CNC machine till the next day. I just have enough time to shut it down and go to bed. That happens to me a lot. I don't know if it happens to you, but it happens to me a lot. And when I come back the next day, it's considerably more work to get that cleaned up. So this to me is a great question. What comes in the 2-ounce package of Starbond? Now this is really great, and this is where I think Starbond is killing it. This is where they're doing so much better than any of these other companies. They are obviously listening to you guys, they're listening to their customers, and they're responding. You have an instruction package, there's lots of really cool information in here. Get some of this, read this stuff, it's really good. Of course, you get your 2-ounce bottle of CA glue. Now this is the perfect size for the work that I do. Seems like a lot to a lot of people. A lot of people use those tiny little tubes. This stuff is great stuff, and when you're using as much as I use, this is the perfect size. They also send a second applicator tip. Now this is one of the things that when I saw this, I was amazed, right? These things always get filled up with glue, and then, you know, the whole bottle's not useful to you anymore. This thing's all stopped up with glue. And you're in there with a needle, like picking it out and cutting it off more and more and more. Starbond, you just pop this second one on there. And then there's a way to make them last even longer. They also include this little package of whip tip applicators and a little plug stopper, right? So this plug stopper has a needle in it that you can use to stick in the top of this. Once the cap gets filled up with glue and hardened, you can't get that on there anymore. Then they've got this little red stopper that you can put in there, and that's really convenient. And then they also have all these whip tips, which are awesome if you're gonna get into small little places, but I find that the tip of this is so small, you can just use it as a cap, and you can apply glue to what you need to do. When it hardens, it'll harden into the tip of this thing. You can cut it off a few times without changing your tip, and you're all set. So really, they set this up so that you can use every drop of this 2-ounce container. One of the common questions that Starbond gets about their CA glue is, what is the best safety practice when it comes to CA glue? And I can't comment to all of the specifics when it comes to the MSDS on this, but I know in my own use that the vapors that come from CA while it's hardening can be quite an experience, and you're gonna wanna avoid that. So I try not to breathe those vapors as much as possible. I like to get my parts set up and aligned and then kind of leave them for a little bit. And that really brings to me one of the other points about CA glue that I really never hear anybody talking about. And it's really key when it comes to guitar building. CA glue is known for being something that sets quickly, right? It sets very quickly and we can move on with our work. That's true to a certain extent. I find that CA glue hardens over time. So when it sets immediately, it's hard, but it is still a little bit pliable. And up to an hour or two later, it can still be kind of pliable, depending on what your conditions in your shop are. I find that if you want it to be a brittle hardness, you wait till the next day. And even when drop filling CA into finishes, if you're gonna drop fill CA into, like, say, a nitrocellulose finish, the CA glue will make the nitro around it soft. And what I've done in the past to get around that is I'll drop fill and then wait till the next day. Give it 24 hours. Now that's not something that people usually do with CA glue. They usually want to use it and move on, but you know, use the material in a way that's useful for you. If the results you get from waiting are superior, then wait, right? So a lot of times when I want the CA glue as hard as it's going to be before I sand or cut away material, I'll just wait till the next day. Okay, this is a good one. When do I use thin CA? Now, I use thin CA in very specific situations. So a lot of my binding work, I use thin CA. I see a lot of other luthiers using all kinds of different adhesives to try to get their binding fit. And I find if you can fit your binding first and then just use the thin CA to wick into that seam, then you get much more reliable results. Now, like I said, it sets quickly, but it's not completely cured, right? Anytime I'm using a thin little piece of material, I like to use this thin CA. So I can wick that in to that binding area, and then I can come back later and fill in some medium viscosity. I like to let it harden all the way up before I do any sanding. That's just my preference. So I'll usually wait till the next day, but you can get away with doing that right away. Okay, that's all I have for today. Hopefully that was some useful information. If there's anything you think I missed, then feel free to hit me up about it. I'd love to see your questions and comments down below. Go to Starbond, get your discount of 15% using the coupon code YouTubeTCI with the link in the description. And thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.